And I appreciate what you're saying, because there was a time when the Oklahoma City Thunder were bringing their third best player off the bench, James Harden, and he was absolutely wreaking havoc in that role. But James Harden had a very specific skill set in that he was a point guard in a shooting guard's body, and they needed that playmaking coming off the bench. And also that was over 10 years ago now.
From an argument that has been made multiple times about why Bradley Beal should come off the bench. So we saw those numbers from him last year. The argument that people are trying to make is that that could raise even higher this season if he were to come off the bench, because him coming off the bench in that natural 2 position that he's played would allow him to just come in and absolutely cook. Your only job is to score. You shoot the ball, you drive, whatever you want to do, that's your job. Do you think that's a possibility if he were to come off the bench? And do you think it could outweigh what he brought as far as like being in the starting unit last year with KD and Book more often?
I feel like that line of reasoning and the reasoning that like you'll be more well-balanced if you bring Beal off the bench, it misses the point that like rotations it's not a hockey rotation in the NBA. You don't just sub 5 in and 5 out. Like, you stagger these things. You can still put Beal in those situations where he is anchoring bench heavy lineups, where he gets to play the 2 without Book on the floor, or gets to be, a 2-3 situation with Book without KD on the floor. Like, you can still do that. You can literally have Beal with the starters, maximize the firepower of that big 3 to open things up for the Tyus Jones, Jusuf Nurkic pick and roll. You can take Beal out around the 6 or 7 minute mark, and you can put him back in at the start of second quarters when Book takes his rest, and you can put him out there with bench heavy lineups, whether it's Tyus Jones or Monte Morris running the show. And that's already an upgrade from what you had to do last year, because even though the minute structure there is similar, you're putting him out there this time with a traditional point guard, which is what everyone wanted. We wanted Beal to not have to run the point because he was pigeonholed into doing things that weren't necessarily in his wheelhouse, or made him a little uncomfortable, made him struggle with, okay, when do I be aggressive as a scorer? When do I be aggressive as a playmaker? You're taking that off the table because you now have a point guard and a backup point guard like everyone wanted. So you can still empower him with those bench heavy lineups. I don't understand why you have to take him out of the game to start games in order to do that. You can still stagger them.
Why not start with a more balanced lineup there, so you put yourself in a position where, okay, we've got some defense, we've got enough offense with these 2 guys. Then you bring Brad off the bench, still with a Devin or a Kevin and a Monte or a Tyus, and he can have more of an opportunity to go out there and cook in a way like Lindsay's talking about that he was more familiar with. And then you can still close games with the 3 of them if you decide to go that route. I think sometimes we get hung up on the thought of, starters and that diminishes a role. But when I was looking at it, right, you talk about Beal's stat line, 18.2 points, 4.4 rebounds, 5 assists, right? You look at 6 men of the year over the lifetime of the award, 2021-22, Tyler Hero, 20.7 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists in almost as many minutes. Beal had 33 minutes a game, and Tyler Hero was at 32.6 minutes. Lou Williams in 2018-19 averaged 20 points, 5.4 assists, 3 rebounds in 26.6 minutes. And then our own Eddie Johnson in 88-89 had 21.5 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.3 assists in 30 minutes. Like, I think you can still be the guy and maybe even be more of the Bradley Beal that you had coming off the bench. Like, I think there's a stigma to that doesn't necessarily need to be there, because he can do just as much, if not more, because you're putting him in a position to do that.
I think if you're looking at the modern NBA, and I appreciate what you're saying, because there was a time when the Oklahoma City Thunder were bringing their third best player off the bench, James Harden, and he was absolutely wreaking havoc in that role. But James Harden had a very specific skill set in that he was a point guard in a shooting guard's body, and they needed that playmaking coming off the bench. And also that was over 10 years ago now. And we saw what happened when he went to the Houston Rockets. We saw that as a 6-man role, that was probably holding him back. Moving forward in OKC, he probably would have needed to be a starter because he is an actual star. Bradley Beal is a star. And whether you still believe he's a superstar or not, bringing him off the bench and minimizing his minutes with your best players doesn't help you. Like, it doesn't balance things out. You're saying, yes, you can, empower him coming off the bench. You can still do that only with the best players. Like, the whole object, like, if we're looking at minutes at the end of a game, like you're saying, okay, starting doesn't matter. It's who finishes or whatever you want to call it. If you're looking at the minute totals for each game, Bradley Beal should probably be third on that list, correct?
Depending on
should anybody be playing more minutes than Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal?
Depending on what Tyus Jones is doing to run the offense, I think you could make an argument that they should be close to each other.
Tyus has only played 29 minutes per game. That was a career high last year. So he's not going to be some guy that's playing 35, 36 minutes, most likely.
I think you could make the argument that Bradley Beal maybe shouldn't be playing that many minutes with the injury.
From a health perspective as well. That was an argument that people were throwing out as to why he should come off the bench too, is because you can limit some of his minutes, maybe ease a little bit of the wear and tear on his body throughout the season.
Guys, Beal is not that old yet.
I know, I agree, but he is injury prone, and if there is a way to help,
but the injury
not guaranteed that any of this would actually help, because a lot of his injuries were fluke injuries last year too.
Right, that's my thing.
So you really can't guarantee that even if you limited his minutes, that it would help in any real way.
Going back to my point, if the goal in basketball is to have your best players on the court more often than the lesser players, Bradley Beal should be third on that list. So why are we bringing him off the bench only to boost his playing time throughout the game when you can just put your best players on the court for more time to start the game, and you can stagger him with the bench and still accomplish that goal without pissing off your third best player and a $50 million guy?
We all silly like the mayor.